Then marry those that please you of other women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to the Niqabi Diary series, Polygyny Talks. What follows is a sister's account of her experience with polygyny. Due to the nature and sensitivity of the topic, some sisters have chosen to remain anonymous. This series was put together in a humble attempt to gain a better understanding of the relevance of polygyny in our times and how it is practiced. Please be respectful in your comments. Finally, I thank all the sisters who have taken part by sharing their stories. May Allah bless you and your families with an abundance of khair in this world and the next, and may Allah accept from us. Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Polygyny Talks. Alhamdulillah, we have with us a sister today, which we're going to talk little bit different. The interview is a little bit different today because this sister is not yet in polygyny, but she has her husband has the intention of being in polygyny, and alhamdulillah, the sister, she has accepted that and she is okay with it. So inshallah, we're going to let the sister introduce herself so that we can go forward with this discussion, inshallah, and find out more about the sister's reasons for accepting polygyny, inshallah. So sister, could you please introduce yourself for the listeners?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I go by the Instagram name Sister Striving. I'm approaching my early 30s, alhamdulillah. I'm married, I have a baby, and I live in the UK.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So you're not yet in polygyny. So
No.
Can you just give us a brief kind of, actually go into as much detail as possible, I think. If you could tell us your main reasons for being accepting of polygyny, or, just explain to us the situation. Is it your husband that is interested in going into polygyny, or is it something you've both discussed and, maybe you've encouraged him to do it? Can you just give us, an explanation, inshallah? Because I know sometimes, I've been contacted previously by sisters who, have encouraged their husbands to, seek a second wife, for example, and there could be a variety of reasons. So, what kind of category do you fall into?
I believe I fall into the last category, which you mentioned, which is I kind of brought the topic of polygyny up to my husband. And the reason where that came to me and how it came across was I was researching about polygyny because it's something that's considered a taboo topic, even in the Muslim community. I believe it's not something that's often talked about. It could be the mixture of cultural influences, perhaps. So I thought, let me engage in a little bit of studies of understanding. I'm a bit of a visual learner, so I kind of go to YouTube. And I heard about a few debates and a few speakers such as Reverts. There's this polygynous couple, I forgot what they're called. They live in America, I believe. And yeah, I listened to them as well. And the name of the YouTube channel comes to me. I'll try and find it, inshallah. I know their name, Sister Nyla, I believe, is the incoming wife. Sister Fatima,
Yes.
Coach Fatima, and Nasir or Nazir, I believe.
Yeah. Nazir, brother Nazir.
Yeah,
SubhanAllah. Alhamdulillah, I've spoken to both of those sisters for this series, and mashallah, it was really, really enjoyable speaking to both of them. So I encourage the listeners to catch up with those
I
episodes.
listen to a lot of their content on YouTube, and I follow them on Instagram for further understanding of their content. And alhamdulillah, may Allah bless them all. I find everything that they do very beneficial because there's not much content out there regarding polygynous families and how they're successful and how they strive to be in the position that they are. I'm sure it wasn't easy to begin with, but they are where they are through the hard work that they put in. So may Allah bless them. And brother Gabriel Al-Romani, he doesn't really talk about his process of becoming into polygyny, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he's in polygyny himself, and he talks about it.
I think somebody had mentioned that to me recently as well.
Okay. And
It would be interesting to be able to speak to some of these brothers' wives, subhanallah, like,
subhanallah,
yeah,
yeah, inshallah, if you do come across the opportunity, I'd love to hear that on your podcast as well. And Sister Naomi B. Roberts, she's pro polygyny, and she's spoken about encouraging sisters to be open to it, or you know, just talking about the pros of that subject, because we hear a lot of the cons, and I'm sure a lot of people can admit that they hear a lot of negative stories associated with polygyny. So I think that's what sparked
absolutely.
my interest in coming to pursue an understanding of why polygyny is a benefit to society. And I think Brother Coach Nasir said that it's a ancient practice that can be a solution to modern day society, and I couldn't agree with that more.
Absolutely. I agree with you too, subhanAllah. So, okay, alhamdulillah. Well, that's one of the reasons why as well I wanted to do this podcast, because
Mm,
just like I was just hearing so many negative things about it. And I think
yeah.
obviously because it is a sunnah, and I mean, I know it's something that was practiced before the time of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And obviously, Allah knows
Yeah,
best. If it wasn't something which had benefit in it, then, Allah could have easily just said, no more polygyny, just keep one
of
wife and that's it.
course.
But we know that wasn't the case. He just put a limit to it,
A
put it on
limit to it.
to
Yeah,
the maximum of
absolutely.
4 wives. So subhanAllah, and I'm living in West Africa now, and it's something which is
Oh,
not
wow.
practiced a lot. I wouldn't say that it's practiced a lot here, but it is normal at the same time. I think
Okay.
we're coming into modern times. People are probably doing it less and less, but at the same time, it is something which is normal. If you hear that an imam has 2 or more wives, it's not, nobody's really going to bat an eyelid. You know what I mean? I remember
Absolutely.
when I first came here, I was speaking with the taxi driver, and he actually said that he knows a Muslim who married 4 sisters on the same day. They're not
Oh,
actual sisters, but
really?
4 Muslim
Yeah, no,
women.
sisters in
Yes, he
Islam.
married them
Yeah.
on the same day. Yeah, he
Wow,
married them on the
subhanallah.
same day. And I thought that
Wow.
I suppose I would love to talk to those 4 sisters. Literally, I would like those four
Inshallah. That'd be
women. I really would,
amazing.
because it would, because subhanAllah, can you imagine, like, if you like a brother who has that intention, because the taxi driver said that he's a young guy, but he was very well to do, really good, successful in business and stuff like that, so
Okay.
he could afford it as well. So he
Yeah.
just married them. He decided that say one day he's just going to marry. I mean, it must have been quite a task for him as well. I mean,
Yeah, of
he's
course.
just going
That's
going
the
full ham at
problem.
once. But
That's the issue that I've noticed. Like with polygyny,
Mhm.
I feel like there's people who see it with a very narrow spectacle of viewing it as, oh, the man is pursuing his lust, he's only interested in one particular thing by pursuing multiple women. But there's more to marriage than that. There's
Exactly,
intimacy is just a small fraction of what marriage you know uh, that takes place in a marriage.
definitely.
So that's that argument is just flawed in many ways in that sense. And I just
It
feel
is
like it's
subhanallah.
people don't acknowledge that it requires a lot for a man to take on more than one wife. I think one wife is hard enough, and then for them to
Think a
take
lot of
another
brothers
wife.
these days, they're challenged. That a lot of brothers these days are challenged with even taking one wife. For many reasons. It could
Absolutely,
be financial. It could be just the fear of responsibility. There's so
of
many different things
course.
that put a lot of
And
men
especially
off
here in the
getting
United
married these
Kingdom,
days.
like there's the
Mhm.
cost of living, the
Yes,
situation in the UK is very tough. So for a man to take on another responsibility of another wife and take on that financial burden, may Allah, bless those brothers who are willing to do that. But I think the intention. It all comes to intention and what you're capable of doing, because you must be able to strive to the best of your ability to be fair and just. And if you're not able to do that, then keep to one, as the
okay.
Quran says.
Yes, subhanallah. So what I wanted to even, coming back to the brother who married before,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
subject I kind of wanted to bring up, and then bring a question to you is, a lot of the times when you know, sheikhs, for example, are asked about polygyny from women who are
yeah,
like sisters who are scared, for example, of their husband possibly like taking another wife because maybe he's mentioned it, or he said, he's interested in polygyny. Like that's the fear of many sisters, for example. The advice that they often get back from ships and things like that is, oh, well, just make sure you do all your best to please your husband, and all that kind of thing, so that he wouldn't have to look elsewhere. I've spoken to a few sisters about this now, and I really think that's bad advice, because it's basically telling the sisters that the reason why their husband is looking into polygyny is because there's something wrong with them. That the husband
exactly.
is
That's like
then interested
not a
in
great argument
looking
to
to
make.
another woman. Exactly. So I think this is one of the things that makes a lot of women insecure about the fact that their husband is seeking a second or subsequent wife. So what I wanted to ask you is, kind of what expectations do you have of polygyny?
I try to keep it as simple as possible, because I feel like if you have an extended list of expectations, it can lead to disappointment. So for me, my ideal requirements is that the incoming wife who joins the dynamic of the family, even though it's two monogamous marriage, they have their own separate marriage, we have our own separate marriage, but when there's times where we're in each other's space and we're interacting, that she's respectful, and it would be a bonus if she gets along with my baby, because he's quite young, and I would love for him to have a bond with and connection with her as well. So that would be my ideal, to be honest. And she treats our husband, with respect and care and kindness, and that would be surely, reciprocated back to her as well.
Definitely, inshallah. So,
Inshallah.
what I wanted to ask you, from that as well, what about your family and friends? Do they know about your husband's intention and your acceptance, even your encouragement, for him to go into polygyny?
Of
How do
course.
they feel about it?
So as far as it comes with friends, I keep my circle very small, because I'm quite selective who I keep in my social space. And with the friends that I do have, they are completely and fully aware of my stance on polygyny and our personal situation, that my husband is open to looking for a spouse in polygyny, and he has had potential sisters in mind for polygyny. However, through the course of vetting them, they realized they're not compatible. So we have been in the process, well, he has been in the process of looking for a potential spouse, and I have been fully supportive. And even one individual who he was getting to know, I'm still in contact with her. Alhamdulillah, she's a really lovely person. But as far as family come into mind, um, they're not aware. But we have had this topic of polygyny come up, just a general topic of conversation, and knowing their stance on it, I don't think it's appropriate to mention it to them. And I'll tell you why. Because if my husband does get to know someone in the process of the courting phase, shall I say, I don't want a situation to occur where they intervene and dampen the experience, where the nikah doesn't happen. I think it's important for the nikah to happen, or slightly prior to that process, then they'll be informed. So there's no unnecessary delays, or unnecessary tension or grievances for the newlywed couple, or prior to them getting married. So there's no interference in that aspect. So it's a conversation, and it's a hard conversation that I'm willing to have with my family, but I don't think it's necessary at this point, being that there's no one present that he's getting to know.
Yes, definitely. I agree. I think that's wise of you, sister, because obviously you know your family better than anyone
Yeah.
else. So, on that note, what would you say, like, you have in mind in general? Like, what kind of approach do you think would be suitable to basically let your family, or break the news to them once it does happen? How would you kind of go about it? Because I know with some, like, for example, one of the sisters that I've spoken to recently, she basically said that when her husband mentioned that he wanted to go into polygyny, she made sure she kind of kind of started dropping hints to her family about it, just to kind of warm them up to the idea.
Okay.
But obviously her situation with her family is different from yours. So, have you kind of, sat down and rethought about it? Like, sometimes you might play scenarios out in your mind, how you go about doing something. So how do you think you'd be able to actually go about telling them?
With me, I intend to either, there's two options for me in approaching my family: either take some individuals aside, whether it's my parents, and then my siblings, and then the wider family, speak to them in different groups. So siblings, and then parents, and then my nieces and nephews, and in that aspect. Or I just have a family meeting with each different family groups and tell them in a calm setting. Hopefully, no hot beverages are present, just water maybe, and tell them in calmly. And I have to ensure that I keep the peace in the conversation. And if it gets heated, um, or there's unnecessary amount of tension, then I have to walk away and um, reschedule that conversation again. But it's not going to be something that you sit down and speak to them about and they'll come around to it in the first interaction. I think it's going to be a work in progress constantly. And the biggest reassurance that I can give them is not my words, but my actions. And then that's where it's not just me that takes part in that, it's my husband and my, inshallah, incoming co-wife. So it's to show them that there is a successful way of going about it, by showing them that, like, I'm working through my issues. Polygyny is not something easy that you go into and thinking it's rose and fairy tales and it's a walk in the park. It's going to be difficult, but I have to work on that myself and connect with Allah to get me through the hardships with it, and then show them that it's working. Because I think the success of it is what will get them around to accept the idea of polygyny, rather than saying that it's fine, it's working, whatever it may be, and just come to accept it. I have to show them that it's something that is acceptable because we're doing it and it's fine, if that makes sense.
Alhamdulillah, absolutely. And I just wanted to make a comment there as well. I think it's important for you to understand also. I mean, I'm talking as a sister, like in similar shoes to you. I'm not in polygyny either. So, but for me as well, like, one thing that I would like, I think it's important to have in your mind is that, when we talk about polygyny being successful, is that obviously you have your marriage with your husband, and if whatever marriages he takes on subsequently, whether they last or not, it shouldn't have any bearing on you, that that I would like this a failure or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Because it could be that your husband does find another wife, and then there could be some issues. I mean, God forbid that they turn out to not be compatible, because it does happen like that sometimes. And obviously, then you have, if you have people which, as we know, negative with negative ideas or understanding of polygyny, they're going to straight away throw it in your face regardless, that, oh, like, this way you shouldn't have done it, subhanAllah. But we know that marriages can, fail whether you're in monogamy or polygyny as well, so it's not specific to polygyny. So I think that's something that as well, inshallah, if when the time does come, if God forbid that was to happen, I want you to, like, remember not to, like, kind of take it hard on yourself, and also for your husband as well, make sure you remind yourselves of that too, that you're doing your best for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just try to bear that in mind. I wanted to ask you, do you have, like, apart from your husband, do you have somebody who, like, is like a support, like an emotional support? Because obviously, when that time does come, you will need kind of somebody in your corner. Do you know what I mean? A little bit. You might, because you're going to be going through kind of a lot of emotions and things like that. I'm not saying, to not talk to your husband, but obviously with the situation, his time will start to be divided and these kind of things. Do you have somebody else that you could find in, possibly, who is not going to be biased, like, and make bad, comments or something about your husband, for example? Because I know that if you don't have your family, and, even if you're close to your family, but this can be a testing time for them too. So if your family aren't supportive, I mean, you might need somebody extra in your corner, just to kind of give you that little bit of extra emotional support.
Absolutely. So for me, I have two close friends. Allahumma barik, they're both wonderful sisters in Islam, and I have spoken
Alhamdulillah.
to them regarding my husband looking for another wife, and that I'm supportive. So they come around to it, because at first they were a bit on the fence and a bit shocked, to say the least. But alhamdulillah, they've come around to it, and they understand that this is something that we are actually not going through a phase. It's something, because it's been over, I think, a year and a half or 2 years that we being consistent with the idea of polygyny. Is not um, something that long term we don't intend to cut off, because the reason why I went into polygyny, sorry, I'm going off into another tangent here. I really appreciate the qualities and attributes my husband has, and he's proven himself to be an amazing husband, alhamdulillah, and a great father. And I feel like he'll bring those qualities and attributes to another sister in Islam who's perhaps struggling to find a connection with someone, or needs companionship. And if I help facilitate that in some way by giving my support, at the very least, to my husband who's in search for it, then I believe my reward would be with Allah. So,
Inshallah.
inshallah, yeah.
So you touched on the qualities of your husband as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you want to say something else?
Oh, no. If you want me to elaborate on the qualities, I don't mind.
Yes, well, that's what I was just going to say. I was
Okay.
going to ask you, what are the qualities, the particular qualities that you see in him? And I would say this obviously isn't an advert, but at the same time,
Of
it could be
course.
because you are looking. So,
Oh, I
alhamdulillah.
see. By the way, I didn't mention that just to find someone through this avenue. It's just to pretty much talk about my situation, and if anyone's in the same situation as me, so I can elaborate more. But the reason why I mention his qualities and attributes is because, for one, is this a deen. He's very like he prioritizes his salah, he prioritizes his relationship with Allah, and not just in like praying and the clothing that he wears. It's also in his character and conduct. He's very well tempered, and obviously sometimes, I don't know if it's every woman or it's just me, I can push his buttons sometimes. But he's very well tempered, which I really appreciate, because one of my fears of going into marriage is like, what if my potential husband has a bad temper, or he has anger problems? But alhamdulillah, he's very much far from that. It takes probably a lot to get him to that level, so alhamdulillah. And I think another sister could benefit from that. And he's very calm, affectionate, kind, considerate. He listens to me when I want to vent or talk. He doesn't give me constant constructive criticism when I don't want it. I just want someone to listen to me. So he evaluates the situation of what I need and what I want. So he's very in tune with me, and obviously that comes with time, but he's overall a very good person, alhamdulillah. So obviously everyone has their faults, and we're all fallible human beings, but he's striving to be the best version of himself, which I appreciate. And I think that's something I'm trying to do, hence why I call myself Sister Striving, because I'm striving to be the best version of myself after many attempts, inshallah, to get back onto the deen and stay consistent and work on myself in every aspect of myself. So yeah,
inshallah. So
inshallah.
okay, okay, I'm going to ask this question first because it just came to my mind actually.
Okay.
What I was going to ask you is, so I asked you before about like, what do you wish to get out of polygyny? So obviously, you said you don't want to kind of put too many expectations, but should it happen, inshallah, like how, and you just mentioned that you are striving to be the best version of yourself. So do you have any kind of plans or like goals in place for yourself that you would set, those days that your husband's going to be with his, inshallah, subsequent wife, one of your co-wife, inshallah? Do you have things that you kind of got this in your mind that inshallah, you're going to start doing certain things, for example, or make sure you make the best of those times? Because I know that like other sisters I've spoken to in it, they say one of the best things that it's done for them is giving them enough free time that they can study the deen more, for example, or, you know, do certain courses, you know, even if they're doing business or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Some of sisters even do coaching with polygyny as well for other sisters. So there's a lot of different things that people can get into. So do you have any specific goals for your own personal self? I know, and you mentioned that you've got a baby as well, obviously. So, I mean, having some time alone obviously is definitely, you know, would be beneficial. A lot of sisters do crave that once they start having, you know, especially young families. So, you know, do you have anything in place to help yourself remain focused as well? Because obviously it will be a critical time, especially in the beginning for you emotionally.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, some sisters, when they have time to themselves, whether it's polygyny or not, or they just have time, they want to prioritize their deen. And for me, I want to really establish a relationship with the Quran. I want to practice my juz, the surahs that I memorize, and try and understand it more, because I don't have a Arabic background. So I want to
Mhm.
understand the words that I say by reading the translation, and try and remember it while I read the juz, either in salah or while I'm just reciting the juzes in
Mhm.
like just normal recitations. And also I want to practice my tajweed, so either having a Quran teacher, whether it's Zoom or going in person. I think that would be really beneficial for me as well. And another thing I want to do in the spiritual aspect, to strengthen my deen, is to attend halakas. There's something I used to do before I had my baby, and I think the commitment of taking care of my child as a stay-at-home mum is very difficult for me to attend halakas at the moment. So if I could free up some time, if that's possible, I would love to attend halakas and establish the sisterhood bond and connect with other sisters, and engage in like remembrance of Allah. And I think that's really beautiful. And there's other things I'd like to do that's apart from Deen. What kind of ties in with Deen is working on my health and fitness, having time to work out, working on my steps. I think having daily movement in your day regularly is really good for me, and just good for
Mhm.
people in general. Um, and just, yeah, working on planning my meals is something that I rush and do, and cook anything that's quick and easy. But if I have time to myself, I like to really plan out my ingredients and plan a meal according to the ingredients I bought to prepare a really good, lovely meal for myself. And yeah, things like that, to be honest. So prioritize Deen, health, and fitness.
Definitely. I think that's a really, really good idea. As I said, it's important to remain focused, and and it's good that you mentioned that you was already doing some of these things previous to having your baby as well, because I think
Mm,
that helps. When you've already kind of started doing something, and even now, like I'm not sure how old your baby is, but it's something that you could even try to get back into bit by bit. So that
yeah,
like you kind of build up to that momentum. Build up the
yeah,
momentum a little bit
gradually
so that
build
when
it
the
up
time
so it's
comes,
not like
you
a
go,
sudden
yeah,
thrush of things in
exactly,
your face.
exactly. Because I think emotionally wise, because at the end of the day, like when we talk about when sisters generally talk about polygyny in the negative way, like it's always from an emotional standpoint. So we have to, as sisters,
Mm,
acknowledge that the emotions are like kind of the biggest barrier to most sisters accepting polygyny. So therefore, if for us sisters who are open-minded towards it, we can't be naive to think that our emotions aren't going to play with us also. So
yeah,
that's why
of
that's why I'm
course.
asking this question, because I'm sure there's plenty of sisters who've listened to the episodes that I've had so far, and they're going to be listening to this and going to be saying, oh, you guys are saying that you're open to polygyny, but wait until your husband gets another one and then see how you feel about it. So yes, it's all about feelings. So we're not trying to
Yeah,
be naive to say that it's going to be you're going to be skipping up and down the house when you find that the husband's had his nikah with a second, third, or fourth wife. It's not that you're going to be that excited, but subhanallah, whatever you're going through, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that,
Of
the
course.
benefit will inshallah be better than, any harm that it could potentially do. And hopefully there wouldn't be any harm, because, hopefully your husband will choose somebody who is also a practicing good sister, who's got good intentions as well, inshallah. And as well, as long
Inshallah.
as your husband has good intentions, this is the main thing. So, and inshallah, it
Absolutely.
will bring a lot of barakah to the families, both families, inshallah. So, but
Mm.
definitely, I spoke to another sister in, and other episodes, and she was saying that, as a first wife, when her husband did get, married again, she was in excruciating pain. She really felt it, and she did approve of him taking on another wife, but it didn't change the fact that she went through those emotions. And she said, it's important as women that we accept that we're going through these emotions. Don't try to pretend that we're not having
Mm.
them, and don't try to act like, all tough and things like that. Just
Yeah.
go through, have the emotions, just try to process them. So that's why I asked, because it's definitely important to have something else as a focus. Because this other sister, she, she's a student, so she was studying, I think, on a postgraduate degree or something like that. So, she had something else to, give her focus to as well, which was helpful. And,
Mm.
obviously having the support group as well, like having a close friend or something like that, somebody that you can, confide in a little bit. And obviously as well, as you mentioned, keeping that, relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost, making lots of dua as well, is really, really important, inshallah.
Inshallah. I completely agree. Like allowing yourself to feel the emotions that you feel, because if you don't allow yourself to feel it, it will build up and probably come out in very unpleasant ways. So with emotions, they come and go and they fluctuate as well. So we shouldn't make decisions in extreme emotional states, because it can lead to probably a bad consequence, to be honest. And I know we have emotions and we feel certain things at certain times, or something triggers it, but we should allow ourselves to understand why we feel those certain things, and evaluate our situation and our thoughts and try and de-escalate our thinking. So if you were feeling quite overwhelmed with emotions, I think it's important to, it's not easy, me saying this, because I have tried to do this in the past, even recently, with different situations that feel negative. And especially with polygyny, like there's going to be times where I'm going to feel down and potentially upset, especially when I'm feeling alone and I find myself in a perhaps not a great headspace. Um, but it's important to evaluate, why am I feeling like this? What is causing me to feel this way? And what can I do to establish a better mindset? Because I feel like things, perspective and the narrative that we tell ourselves has a big impact on our emotions. So if we tell ourselves that, oh, this is so bad for me, my husband's with someone else, he's not with me, he probably loves her more, it's not going to lead to a good recipe. It's probably a recipe for disaster, to be honest. So I think if you're in that space, just do those counter thoughts, to be honest. It's not easy at all, because I've been in a situation where polygyny was almost around the corner in reality for me, and I had to do those counter thoughts to kind of remind myself, why am I accepting polygyny in the first place? Why am I encouraging my husband to do it? So I kind of come back to the purpose of my why. So I'm not, swayed by all these negative thoughts. Because I worked with a Muslim coach. I believe he's a counselor as well. His name is Nasir Alamin. He was recommended to me to work with, I believe, by Naomi Roberts. I just had a brief Instagram conversation with her about my husband looking for polygyny, and then his name was sent, and I started working with him. So he mentioned this disruptive thinking and how to de-escalate my thinking by telling myself a different narrative. And I find that such a healthy impact for me, not in just polygyny, but also in just general aspects of life when you feel negative. So I think that's quite a useful tool to have.
MashaAllah. So I've not heard about this. So could you give us an example of how this works?
Uh, I believe I did an interview with Nasir Al-Amin, and he knows the model very well inside out because he's a coach and counselor with other people. From what I remember, it's like if you're feeling negative, you have the thought of a negative feeling, and when you feel that negative feeling, in order to prevent it from escalating into something more awful, you try and de-escalate that thinking by telling yourself a different and positive narrative. But before that, you have to understand why you're feeling a certain way. So you establish an understanding of why you are in the state that you are, and what is the narrative that you're telling yourself. And you have to kind of change the narrative, and by giving yourself a different perspective that's positive. I'm trying to think of an example so there's a better understanding. So for instance, I'm telling myself that my husband won't love me because he's with someone else. It's just a narrative that I'm telling myself, and I have to think of why I'm telling myself that, because he's with someone else and he's established a connection with her. And I have to give myself another narrative of not going with those thoughts so they escalate into something negative even more so, by telling myself he does love me. He's proven that by being with me for how many years, and proving himself in this relationship by going through trials and tribulations with me, and coming through the other end in the the better side of it, things. And just like everything he's done for me, and everything, his character and conduct, how he's been with me, that doesn't confirm that he doesn't love me anymore. He loves someone more than me. Even if he does love, because I think people can vary in their love for other people in their lives, but it doesn't mean he doesn't love me at all, or he doesn't love me any less. um so it's just giving yourself a different perspective of what the situation currently is, so you can bring yourself into a more neutral headspace.
Okay, that makes sense, mashallah. Yeah, subhanallah. I can understand how that works actually.
Alhamdulillah. But yeah,
Sorry, that's just
if I had the
my
model on me,
notification.
I can explain it better, because I was sent the PDF on email, but I can't, bring it up at this current time. But yeah, it's something worth looking into. Don't know what it's called, but it's just how to de-escalate your thinking so it doesn't become more awful than how it already is. Because I think we have a habit, generally speaking, people feel negative, and they just feel like, well, I feel negative, so I'm just gonna feel worse about myself by dwelling with these thoughts, and it just can become really even more negative, and you can potentially spiral, feeling really low, and in such a rut of a mindset, and thinking it's just all over the place. But if you try to actively, mentally and emotionally give yourself a different perspective, that's going to have a much more positive impact than just dwelling. Obviously, allow yourself to feel what you need to feel, but then pick yourself up after that, and not just sit in a rut.
Absolutely. Actually, what I was thinking of while you were while I was listening to what you were saying is it actually reminded me of the hadith where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us that we should always make excuses for each other. I know it's not like exactly the same thing, like having negative thoughts and but if we're having negative thoughts and which involve other people, like thinking about how other people feel about us or something like that, like the example you gave, for example, about your husband marrying somebody else because, oh, he doesn't love me. So when we have this, it's a negative thought which involves somebody else and negative thinking of somebody else. So it's like that's what I came to my mind is making excuses for the other person, and instead of like making negative assumptions and jumping to conclusions, we should try to look for excuses as to why the person has done such and such a thing or whatever. And subhanAllah, I was even it even reminded me of a lecture that I listened to recently by Imam Shadid Muhammad, and he was basically talking about how he gave the example of Prophet Musa and Khidr alayhi salam, and how Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he had made a mistake in the beginning, when the Bani Israel had asked him who is the most knowledgeable person on earth, and he just said, oh, it's him, because he assumed that because he's a prophet he must be the most knowledgeable person. But then Allah corrected him and had to show him, well, actually he wasn't the most knowledgeable one, there was somebody else that was also
More.
knowledgeable. So
Yeah.
I think this kind of so I think this kind of way of thinking, it can work in many and multiple ways. And obviously the journey that Musa alayhi salam went on, at every point that he saw Khidr do something, he actually thought of it as something negative. And all of us
Yeah.
read in the Quran and we know the stories, we would all jump and assume this negatively about these things as well. But it's like, so it's a really like special and it's a very specific training to be able to like train yourself to try to see the positive side of something. And I think that kind of comes back to as well, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that we may love something which is bad for us, and we may also hate something which is good for
That's
us,
good for us.
and that Allah knows and we do not know. So I think that as well kind of, that's kind of how my thinking was, like kind of, going around, while listening to what you were saying, because, we have these thoughts all the time, and there's nothing wrong with having certain emotions. We're human beings at the end of the day, and that's part of processing them. So we have to, reflect all the time, and it's good to bring it back to the Quran and the Sunnah. And another thing that I wanted to, also, bring to it was, regarding the Sunnah specifically as well, is that we do have examples of polygyny in the Sunnah as well, which are helpful to us as women, which show us that there's nothing wrong with having the emotions. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned, even about the qualities that your husband also has, is his level of patience, and he's, calm, even-tempered person. And this is, one of the attributes that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, obviously in bucket load, subhanAllah, because obviously he was the best of creation.
Of course.
So, and we see that with his treatment of his wives. And when Aisha radiallahu anha, when she was jealous, when one of the other wives had sent a plate of food, and she smashed the whole
dropped
plate.
it. Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Subhanallah.
She smashed the plate, and in front of guests. How many husbands now, if you was even in a monogamous marriage, if your husband had guests with him, and you came and you just, you was angry for some reason and just decided you're going to smash the plate in front of the guests, how many husbands now would even accept that? How many of them would deal with it in the way that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had dealt with, how he dealt with has, emotions at that period of time, because he was very calm about it. He didn't make any big deal. He just said, oh, she's experiencing jealousy. She's experiencing the feeling of jealousy, subhanAllah. So, and that was it. He didn't go and like give her a lecture or lash out or anything like that. SubhanAllah, he was very understanding and calm about it. And obviously Aisha radiallahu anha, because she is a pious Muslim woman who's got a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even at that level that she was. And we know that, she's one of our examples, the mothers of the believers. She was going through those emotions and she acted out on them, subhanAllah. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have such feelings of, negativity, but, obviously we should try to, monitor them or curb them as much as we can. And, so we don't go overboard, we don't pass, pass the limits.
Absolutely.
I mean?
Definitely.
Like, really think, because sometimes sisters may think, oh, they wanted to end their marriage or something like that, because polygyny is coming to the equation, and sometimes they try to threaten their husbands with leaving them because the husband is thinking about going into polygyny. But it's just like, is your marriage worth all the blessings and the barakah that's come through in your marriage?
Let that
is it
all
worth
go and just let it diminish?
What I mean, subhanallah. And it's just like, and just because I'm we're talking obviously as two sisters who've never been in it, so we're not saying this as something lightly, but we're talking as sisters who accept that we are women and we have emotions, we are emotional people, and we're very jealous naturally. That's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in women as well.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned a great point, and the word train your mind or train your thought. And I think that's something we should actively do as individuals, whether you're a sister or a brother or you're in polygyny or not. Because especially with polygyny as well, when it comes to certain negative thoughts, you have to constantly work on yourself so that you don't escalate that negative thought into something more awful and awfulize the situation and react with a response that's going to cause a lot of consequences. So to deter that from happening, I think it's important to train yourself to avoid escalation of emotions and actions that can lead to consequences. So I think, yeah, it's an important word that you mentioned, which is to train your mind from preventing that from happening. But yeah, allow yourself to feel those feelings, but just don't let it magnify into something that becomes ugly, inshallah.
Inshallah. So, do you have any examples in real life of, apart from like obviously online, do you
Mm.
have any examples in your community at all of anybody ever being in polygyny or anything like that?
I in my personal life, I don't know anyone who is in polygyny. However, I am in a polygynous support group for sisters, which is on Telegram, and it's for sisters who are considering to, uh, as in their husbands are considering to go into polygyny, or they're in a polygamous marriage but they just want support or to network with other women in a similar situation, or people like myself who support their husband, or their husband's going into polygyny, whether it's an idea or they're actually actively going into it or in the process of getting into polygyny. So in that sense, I know of sisters in polygyny. um, so it's more of an online situation that I'm aware of polygyny in that aspect, and we support each other. And the center of it is the Deen, so it's for Muslim sisters who find themselves in some sort of situation that relates to polygyny, and we support each other, and there's a really good bond in there and sisterhood, and we strive to be positive in some aspect, even though it's quite of a difficult thing to go through, whether you're someone who's upfront and supportive of the idea or you're not. But there's a mixture of our sisters in the group from different backgrounds and different situations revolving polygyny, and we just support each other. And it's a really good group because Allahumma barik, all the sisters on there are like, alhamdulillah, really lovely.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So, given your supporting your husband and actually even encouragement of him going into polygyny, how much do you expect to be involved in his selection of a subsequent wife, if at all?
Do you mean in the courting phase or post nikah? Just so I have a better understanding of the question, so I can
Well,
answer
the
it better.
courting phase, really, isn't it? Just
Okay,
just in this, in
yeah.
selecting a sister in general, because I think some
Yeah.
sisters say they want to be involved in his choice, and some sisters don't want to be involved at all. So, and there's kind
Mm,
of like a little bit of an in between of that as well.
yeah.
So, and he, how has it gone so far? Have you been involved? Because I know that
Yeah.
obviously you've encouraged him to go into it, so maybe you might have been looking for him at the same time. How's it like kind of been? Have you been navigating that?
Yeah, it's been a mixture of the middle option, I think you mentioned, where it's like kind of bit of both. Like I'm slightly involved, I'm not completely not involved. So I kind of assess the situation. If I encountered a sister personally and she says she's interested in my husband, whichever avenue we have come across, then I'm usually involved and I'll get them uh, engaging in conversation in a halal manner as much as possible. Or if he found her, I leave it to him where I should be involved in. If the sister wants to speak to me, I'm more than happy to do so. Or I just rely on my husband to vet the sister and to ask the good questions that needed to be asked, and to ensure that she's the right fit for him and for his family, inshallah. So kind of like just go by the situation, assess it, and then conduct myself how I should according to what the situation requires of me. Um, but I'm more than happy to get involved in terms of the courting phase by talking to the sister, seeing what commonalities we have, what her expectations are, um, her do's and don'ts in polygyny. So I think that's an important thing to discuss if you do expect to have a cordial relationship with your co-wife. Um, so what expectations she has, what expectations I have, and so we have a common understanding, and inshallah it flourishes in the best possible ways, in terms of having a good co-wife relationship, and her, seeing that she's compatible with him as well, and their separate conversation.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's like kind of the healthy medium, and it makes sense, I suppose, because obviously since you are, supportive of polygyny, so it only makes sense that you're going to meet more sisters and he does, isn't it? In your day-to-day life. So yeah, that makes a lot of
Inshallah.
sense.
Yeah. Inshallah.
Okay, so you said that you only have the one child at the moment, so just a
Yeah.
baby. Is
Yeah,
that
alhamdulillah.
the case?
Just
Okay.
under 1 year old.
Okay, so and you already mentioned that you would love that your potential co-wife could basically be able to like bond with your child as well.
Yeah,
So
inshallah.
are
I
you
would
and your
love
husband
that.
looking for somebody? Are you and your husband looking for somebody who's been previously married before, or is there
My
like
husband's
when you
very
talk about getting
open-minded.
pregnant?
He's not very
Right.
close-minded in terms of
Mm-hmm.
whether she's a divorcee or a widower, and I've noticed, I don't know why, but in some cultural backgrounds they refer to as reverts as being not as desirable as someone who's born Muslim in the same culture as them. I don't know why that is. I don't understand that mindset. I think reverts, Allahumma barik, may Allah bless them for coming and embracing the deen and practicing in the best form possible rather than diluting it with culture, which happens in my cultural background, being South Asian. But yeah, he's open to reverts as well. And in this current financial time and current situation where he is financially in his job, he said he's willing to consider someone with children, but it depends on the situation. So it's kind of circumstantial.
Yeah, because it's interesting because I wanted to even wanted you to expand a little bit more
Of
on
course.
the term vetting because
Yeah.
sometimes I think definitely now with the whole red pill community that's going on within the Muslims,
Oh, okay.
there's certain terms that I use that are triggering to some sisters basically.
Oh,
So
I
just
see.
to
I didn't think
de-trigger,
of that
just to
before, or
de-trigger
that didn't come to
anybody who's
mind.
listening. Yeah,
Okay.
just to de-trigger anybody who's listening, can you just kind of expand on what exactly you mean by vetting sisters? Because
Sure.
somebody might be sitting there thinking, "What do you mean we need to vet sisters? What about the brothers?"
Yeah, I think there's both
who's going to vet
ways,
your
to be
husband?
honest. Yeah, like you have to have if possible, the mahram of the sisters to vet the brother, because I feel like men know men, and sisters can only
Exactly.
try and understand men, but they won't know to the full capacity because men's mind are wired differently than women's mind. So I think it's important for sisters to vet the brother, either both herself and her mahram, and the brother who's looking into a potential wife to vet the sister in terms of knowing her, how compatible they are together, any bad habits she may have, things along those lines, and just to assess the compatibility and how they'll work moving forward, whether if there's anything to be aware of, whether it's health conditions, if they're open to talk about that. I think that'd be important as well. What support each person may require, if there's any pre-existing conditions or mental health or physical health, any disabilities, things like that, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Subhanallah. I wanted to pick up on what you'd mentioned about reverts and people saying that reverts are less desirable. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I think one of the things, one of the reasons why people, well, what I've heard online basically is because reverts have potential pasts. Being non-practical, obviously people who weren't Muslim before, we could have done many things, for example, whether married or not, all these kind of things, so I think that's the kind of the comparison that people, give it to people. And obviously, like, even though that could have happened, even somebody who's a Muslim or be raised Muslim, they could have a past too. But it's good as Muslims, we have to give each other the benefit of the doubt. It's not acceptable for brothers to question sisters who haven't been married previously, what they've been doing, basically, because if they've repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that, like, what they've done previously is between them and Allah, and Allah's already covers their sins for them. And the same with reverts, basically, because obviously when you become a Muslim, your previous sins are forgiven and they get turned into good deeds. So, like, you know, I think that's important
Subhanallah,
for people
yeah.
as well. And you know, just a reminder to all of us, is that all of the Sahaba, well, the majority of them were reverts. So we have to remember that as well, you know, subhanAllah. And I don't think there's anybody alive today who would say that if they could marry one of the Sahaba, that they would say no because, you know, they were a revert. You know, none of us would,
Subhanallah,
you know,
that's
subhanAllah.
very,
So,
very true. That's a really good thing to mention, like regarding our Sahabas, because it's something that I
yeah,
didn't.
subhanAllah.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously,
subhanallah.
I'm not going to say that the reverts or any Muslim in our time is comparable to the Sahaba, but I'm
Of
just
course,
talking about
but
the
the
kind of
example that you're trying
perception.
to highlight,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, basically, you know, subhanAllah. So, you know, I think that's important to remember. And it just comes back to giving people the benefit of the doubt and having positive thoughts about other Muslims. That doesn't mean that we should be blind or naive towards, you know, others and like maybe like how they treat us, for example. But, you know, the
Mm,
proof is in the pudding at the end of the day. Let's take people at face value and, you know, not try to read something else other than what, you know, is
mm,
being presented to us because,
of
you know, as
course,
Muslims, we're discouraged from, you know, having suspicions towards people as
of
well, you
course,
know, and
yes,
we have
definitely.
that once, especially as females, like I think that's something natural in women that we have, that it's easy for us to kind of get paranoid and try to, and like, you know,
Read
start with
into the
one piece
situation
of the
more than what
yarn.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah, because I would one piece of yarn and end up at the other end of it completely within like a matter of seconds, you know. So finally, like it's end up with something completely different. So it's important to you know, as you know, like I was saying before, just try to train our thoughts. So you know that applies to like every situation really. If we think about, you know, our relationship with people and how we interact with them and
mm,
our thoughts as well, inshallah. So yeah, that's really important.
mm.
I asked you if your family is supportive of the polygyny. What about your husband's family? Are they supportive of the polygyny?
I think if the situation did come to light in terms of becoming a reality, I think his family will come around to it more quickly and they'll be less reactive than mine. So I think my center of focus would be more towards my family to, in the long run, of trying to, you know, help them accept the idea and making sure that I present myself in the best possible way by working on my emotions and things along those lines. So it's not overwhelming for them at the same time. So in terms of his family, I think they'll be more likely to be accepting in a shorter space of time than my family, if that makes sense.
Mm. And you, is your
Inshallah.
are you close? Are you close with his family at the same time you're having a good relationship with them?
Yeah, it's alhamdulillah, it's a good relationship. I would say, in honesty, I'm more close with my family. I think it's just having been brought
Well,
up
that's
with
only
them, lived
natural,
in the
isn't
house. Yeah, but I do have a,
it? Yeah.
respectful bond with my in-laws. I see them often, and yeah, it's good, alhamdulillah. We stay in contact, and there's no hard feelings there.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I
Alhamdulillah.
asked that specifically because sometimes, well, what came to my mind is that, you know, sometimes with in-laws, you know, if the relationship can be very good, you know, obviously it can be either end of the spectrum, you know, because like
Yeah,
we know that like we're giving examples of nightmare in-laws, like that's something that,
yeah, I've
you know,
heard of
people love
that
to
a
hear about,
lot.
but you don't
Yeah.
often hear about people being close with their in-laws. But I personally have seen it a lot in the Muslim community where like the daughter-in-law is very much loved by her in-laws, and you know she's seen
Mm.
as a daughter to them. So you know,
Yeah.
and especially maybe if the family didn't have a daughter of their own, you know, they've only had
Yeah,
sons, for
especially
example,
then.
you know,
Yeah.
so it could be that they have a very special bond. So that's why I
Mm.
asked, because you know, it could be that something that, you know, if they're not like open to the idea, maybe they would be hurt almost as much as your parents, for example, you
Of
know. So that's why I was
course. Yeah.
asking about that, and because that could you know, in turn have some, you know, ripple effect on the potential you know, marriage of your husband with your co-wife, you know.
Mm.
So that's
Definitely.
there's so many different dynamics, subhanallah, you know, with with polygyny. It's like it's quite like,
Yeah.
you know, think about it, it's
Bigger.
almost like opening the like a kaleidoscope thing, and it's just like going like
It gets
multiply and
bigger and bigger
multiply. There's
and
so many
it
different types of
progresses and
possibilities,
expands.
isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
subhanallah, subhanallah. Alhamdulillah. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about, sister, that maybe I haven't mentioned, or I don't know if I've asked you the same, like this. It's been the same conversation for you as you had
No,
last time,
not
so I
at
didn't get
all. No, it's
to
been different, and the conversation centered around the with my previous interview with my coach regarding the model that I mentioned briefly, but not as well as he would have had mentioned it, regarding how to regulate your emotions. So that was mostly the center of our conversation in my previous interview on his YouTube live, but this has been more different, and it varied with different questions around polygyny, because it mentioned family and things along those lines. So alhamdulillah, it's been really good. Just want to mention about jealousy just quickly. I think it's important that we acknowledge that we are human and we experience a variety of different emotions, and one of them being jealousy, and that's something that we will encounter most likely, or in fact it's inevitable with polygyny. But it's just important to regulate your emotions with that, and just understand that if you know your husband best, if he's been good to you, he's been a good husband, he's been supportive throughout these years, then just try and reassure yourself with all those good qualities and attributes that you have and the past that you've had. And yeah, just try and work through those feelings with either a supportive friend or family, or someone in the deen who especially in the deen, who can center focus you back into your purpose in life, because this life is really short and we're only here to worship Allah, to praise Allah, to work on our good deeds and collect as much good deeds as possible. And the feelings with polygyny are going to evolve, they're going to come back, you're going to feel jealousy here and there, but it should inshallah simmer down, especially in the beginning phase of it. It should be a bit difficult, most likely, but over a period of time, if you work on yourself and you work on your relationship with your husband and try and work together as a team, inshallah, it will come to a better outcome, inshallah.
absolutely. And I think definitely that's important, and to keep channels of communication all the time, like
Mm,
openness, inshallah. I
mm.
just wanted to add there as well, because I remember the name of that it's the couple, the family that was mentioned at the
Mm.
beginning of the interview, is the outstanding personal relationships.
Yes, that's
Okay,
it.
yes,
Alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah,
Thank you,
yeah,
sister.
that's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they're
actually,
really good, alhamdulillah.
I always put their channel link and everything in the description box, anyways, as a lot along
Yeah,
with
they have,
other sisters
alhamdulillah,
who are also
amazing variety of
coaches and stuff
content
like that.
regarding it. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah,
Yes,
it's
they
really
do.
good.
They really
Yeah.
do, and regular content. Like they're posting almost every day. I see. So,
Yeah,
there's so many different
subhanallah.
things. They're addressing all sorts of different questions and stuff like that.
Mm,
So it's really like alhamdulillah beneficial, the things that they're doing, and
yeah.
there's a lot of information out there basically. I suppose encouragement and support as well, because
Yeah.
obviously there is a way that polygyny can be done successfully, and we need to hear more success stories rather than nightmare stories. And I'm not saying that people
Absolutely.
who have had the nightmare story shouldn't speak out, because I believe that's
Of
as
course.
important, so that we can know what to avoid and what not to do. And also for sisters who are interested in going into polygyny, so to have, like, to understand the red flags that they should be looking out for, inshallah. Yeah.
Inshallah. Yeah, definitely, inshallah. So it's take the good with the bad, to be honest.
Definitely, because I mean that's part of the sunnah as well, isn't it? The
Mm,
Sahaba, they used to ask about the haram things so that they could know to avoid them. It wasn't like they wanted to do those things; they just wanted to make sure that they always stayed on the right track. So you
mm,
need to know about what is wrong in order to avoid it, and
yeah,
what doesn't work so that you can avoid it.
yeah.
So inshallah, may Allah bless us with much barakah in our family lives. I mean.
Ameen. Inshallah. Ameen.
Amazing. So, Alhamdulillah, sister, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And I
Vice
pray that Allah
versa.
subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your husband in your marriage, and also give you much patience and perseverance when the day comes that your husband, inshallah, finds that compatible spouse, subsequent spouse. I hope so that he does, inshallah.
Ameen.
Yeah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you and keep you steadfast.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you too for everything that you have done for in this podcast. May Allah make it beneficial for us all, and may Allah bless you in all your endeavors in this dunya and make us all successful in the akhirah. Ameen.
Ameen wa iyaki, sister. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.